there, pen fans, and welcome to the fifth and final video in our Fountain Pen 101 series, where I'll be going over the best ways to hold a fountain pen, proper writing posture, and explore the trifecta of pen, ink, and paper that will help you to get the best writing experience possible. If you haven't seen videos 1 through 4 in the series yet, I recommend that you check them out after you watch this one, as there will be a lot more detail about how fountain pens work, their various parts, how to clean them, and details on the nibs in those videos. We've got all of those videos compiled for you in a playlist that you can go check out and watch them all in a row if you'd like. My goal after you watch this video and the whole 101 series is that you have all the groundwork needed to enjoy your fountain pen writing experience to the fullest. Let's start off by talking about how to hold a fountain pen in your hand. Now, my assumption is that you know generally how to hold a pen and write with it, as you've probably done so for most of your life, but you probably don't think about it very much. There are some specific aspects of what I'll cover that are unique to fountain pens, but mostly you can apply this knowledge to writing with just about any writing instrument, and you'll be better for it. When placing a fountain pen in your hand, you'll want to hold the grip of the pen with your fingers and rest the body of the pen in the crook or web between your thumb and index finger. Fun fact, this area is also called the perlicue if you want to impress your friends and sound really smart. You don't want your fingers to touch the nib itself unless you love the look of inky fingers. So grab onto the grip in whatever place feels most comfortable to you above the nib. Most people will hold their pens with a 3-fingered grip using the thumb, index, and middle finger. Some people use a 4-finger grip or some other modification, which for me doesn't work because my fingers are too large, but basically you can hold it however you feel comfortable. The idea is that the pen is resting mostly on your middle finger, with your thumb and pointer finger acting like tweezers for making very precise movements as you grip the pen. You don't want to feel like you're having to grip the pen tightly with some sort of death grip. It should be firmly in place, but with only enough grip strength to control the pen. The harder you grip your pen, the more you'll fatigue your hand, and you'll run into cramping issues as you write. Just relax. The major benefit of a fountain pen is that the ink flows easily, so you may have to actually untrain yourself from firm grips that you've gotten used to with other types of pens. Fountain pens in general are also thicker than most other types of pens, so it makes it a little easier to grip and control your pen with less effort. It's also good to keep in mind that as you're writing, you don't have to bear down and put pressure on the nib into the paper like you might with maybe some other types of pens. The pen should basically write under its own weight, so all you're trying to do is control that movement across the page. It's also important to pay attention to the rotation of the pen in your hand, keeping it from rolling too much left or right, or you could run into some ink flow issues. Most newer people to fountain pens don't even realize that they rotate the pen in their hands, since it doesn't really matter if you do this with any other style of writing instrument. So just make sure to check yourself with that, especially if you're having flow issues. Once you feel like you have a relaxed and comfortable position of the pen in your hand, take note of the pen angle in relation to the writing surface. Most nibs are ground in such a way that a 45 to 55 degree angle works best, though you may find that you write with a lower or higher angle than that, and that's okay. Just know that if you write in an extreme angle one way or the other, you might have to be more selective about the pens that you use, or you could consider getting a custom grind to accommodate such an angle. Since most fountain pens have a removable cap, many of them can be written just as they are with the body, or you can take the cap and post it onto the back. It's completely up to you how you want to write, but the biggest consideration is how posting it might add some weight onto the back of the pen, which can tire out your hand. With resin pens, this isn't usually so much an issue, but when you get into other materials like metal, the cap weight can get pretty significant. It'll honestly just be a personal preference thing. Now, while writing posture isn't something that you may have ever thought about, it can make a difference in your comfort and even the appearance of your handwriting. I find that it helps to think of a fountain pen as a true writing instrument, just as you would a musical instrument. When you play a musical instrument, there's a lot of attention given to posture so that you can play that instrument well and not fatigue or overwork certain joints or muscles. It's the same when writing. If you're just writing a few words here and there, your posture matters a lot less. But if you're writing for any significant amount of time, such as when you're journaling or maybe writing a long-form letter to someone, take a few seconds to get your posture right, and it'll make a difference for you. You'll want to sit up straight at a desk or a table with a flat writing surface, with your feet flat on the floor. You should sit at a height that allows your arm to hang freely with your forearms parallel to the writing surface. This allows you to have a full range of arm motion. The heel of your hand should rest on the surface with just the weight of your forearm resting on it. This way, you can maintain control of your pen and easily glide your hand across the page. The ideal writing movement is using a balance of finger movement, wrist movement, and elbow movement. Your fingers have the most precise control for forming letters, but the muscles and tendons in your hand are smaller, so they'll tire out if you rely only on those. By incorporating your wrist and your forearm, you'll be able to write longer and with less fatigue, though admittedly, it will take a little bit of practice. Try it out and see if it makes a difference for you. Like anything else, practice makes progress. What really matters is that you enjoy the process and feel comfortable while you write. When writing, you may find it helpful to turn the paper in the direction of your hand so that the paper is more or less in line with your forearm. You can play around with rotating the paper more or less as it suits you. This is especially the case if you're writing with a stub or a flex nib, as the relationship of the writing line to the pen will change the look of your handwriting. So it might be something that you want to experiment with. While I won't get into actual handwriting advice or practice here, I highly recommend master penman Michael Sull's book, The Art of Cursive Penmanship. It's the best resource that I've found for advice on cursive writing, with lots of practice sheets included. Just know that most of my advice in this video is based on my experience as an American writing in block print and Palmer method American cursive. So there will be some modifications or maybe alterations that you want to make if you're writing in other languages. It'll be helpful for you to understand a few key terms often used to describe the fountain pen writing experience. Feedback or tooth can refer to how smooth a nib feels as you write, but it can also be used to describe the smoothness of the paper that you're writing on. If there's a lot of feedback, that means it's less smooth and you feel more resistance or drag as you write. Bleed through happens when your ink absorbs all the way through the paper and onto the other side. This can happen with thinner and more absorbent paper, especially with wetter pens and ink. This is rarely a desirable trait, especially in a notebook where you intend to use both sides of the paper. Ghosting is not quite as extreme as bleed through. The ink hasn't gone through the back of the paper, but you can still sort of see it on the other side. Thicker paper helps to avoid this, as does using lighter colored ink. Spread or feathering can happen more with absorbent paper. It's basically the paper acting like a sponge and soaking up the ink and spreading it out. Really absorbent paper will make your writing line look thicker, and it also kind of flattens out the color and any special characteristics of the ink, like sheen or shimmer. They just won't show up as much. Dry time refers to how quickly your ink dries to the touch. This may or may not matter much to you unless you're in particular circumstances, like maybe writing in a journal and you need to close it up quickly on the go. Or if you're writing left-handed and you drag your hand across your writing as you go. Dry time can be minimized by the ink formulation itself, by putting down less ink with your pen and nib choice, and by using paper that's more absorbent. Ink resistance is a paper feature that causes the ink to pool up on the surface and dry on top, as opposed to being absorbed into the paper. There's no measurable standard for this really, but generally speaking, the smoother and heavier the paper is, the more likely it is to resist ink absorbing into it. Paper weight or thickness can get pretty confusing, so I'll just give you the high points here. Most notebooks you'll find won't have a measure of paper thickness, but instead paper weight. There's often a lot left unknown to us as paper consumers about exactly what makes up the paper in our notebooks, but very broadly speaking, heavier weighted paper is more likely to be better suited for fountain pen ink than lighter weight. Most decent paper for fountain pens is measured in grams per square meter, or GSM. So look for a number like 80 GSM when you're shopping for notebooks. Now that you're comfortable in your writing position and with your pen in your hand, let's talk about something that I like to call the fountain pen trifecta. There's a relationship between the fountain pen, the ink that flows through it, and the paper that it's written on that will influence the overall enjoyment of your writing experience. This is both a blessing and a curse, because it means that you can fine-tune exactly what you want to get out of your writing, but it also means that it's going to take some experimentation to figure out exactly what you like, and it's somewhat of a process of self-discovery. The biggest factors of a fountain pen that affect the trifecta are the nib size, how smoothly the nib is ground, and how much the ink flows through the pen based on the feed and nib design. You can't really do a whole lot about how wet a pen writes, and that's all about the feed design. But know that the broader the nib size you choose, the more ink it'll generally put down and the more saturated that ink will appear. With absorbent paper, the more ink that your pen puts down, the more likely it is to feather or bleed through the back. So if you use absorbent paper, maybe try a finer nib. In terms of ink, there are several factors at play. Obviously, the color of the ink itself has the biggest visual impact. If you're putting down a lot of ink, it'll look darker and take a little bit longer to dry. Characteristics of ink, like shading, shimmer, sheen, and dry time, are also heavily influenced by how absorbent the paper is. As a general rule, when it comes to ink, the broader the nib size and wetter the pen, the more ink that it puts down on the paper. The more ink resistant the paper is, the more that ink is going to sit on the top of the page, and it holds a crisper line, shows more vibrance in the ink color, and things like shading, shimmer, and sheen will stand out a lot more. That's all at the compromise of longer dry time though, so there's a balance to be struck. Sadly, very few inks actually advertise all these properties, so things like flow and dry time are pretty much left to subjective feedback in reviews or through your own testing. Now, paper is often the most overlooked aspect of the fountain pen experience. In the US, where I am, our standard for paper is frankly just not that great. It's often absorbent and rough, mostly made for inkjet printers, ballpoints, and rollerballs, which all work well enough with this type of paper. Fountain pens work okay on this paper too, but you'll find that upgrading your paper will make a more substantial difference than you'd probably expect. It'll be like the difference of driving on a gravel road versus driving on asphalt.
This is so luxurious. Yeah.
Going with a smoother and more ink-resistant paper, fountain pens will not only feel better, but the vibrance, shading, and color of the ink will drastically improve. Being totally transparent here, trying to understand what makes paper good, it's kind of confusing, and not really something that I think you should focus on too much when you're first getting into fountain pens, as it'll just kind of feel like a burden. But being a fountain pen retailer, here we curate all the paper products we carry to be suitable for fountain pens. So we try to make that somewhat easier for you. But of course, your own preferences will vary, and you can certainly use fountain pens on whatever paper that you have available. In my experience, you can't always trust the marketing hype around paper quality, so reading reviews from those using fountain pens and trying different papers out for yourself is best. If paper seems overwhelming and you literally just want one place to start, I recommend a Rhodia number 16 pad. It's like an A5 size. It's 80 gram paper. It's gonna be a really good example for you of what good fountain pen paper is like. So you can just pick up one of those for a few bucks, try it out, and see what kind of a difference it'll make. What I'm really hoping to get across with the whole trifecta thing is that you can vary your own writing experience quite a bit just by trying out different combinations of pens with varying nib sizes, different inks, and different papers. You might find that just by mixing and matching different ones, you find combinations that you really like. One helpful way that you can get to test a lot of different inks without committing to a full bottle is with ink samples. This is something we make in-house at Goulet pens, and it's a little 2 milliliter sample size. It's enough to fill a pen a couple of times and get a really good sense of how it writes. Because writing is such a highly personal experience, there's no one right way to do it. And what you really love may be different than what somebody else will love. What matters most is that your pen feels good to you when you write, that ink looks pleasing to your eye, and that you find the experience rewarding. And with that, we've reached the conclusion of Fountain Pen 101. I strongly encourage you to revisit the 5 videos from this series from time to time, as we packed a lot into them, and I think that you'll be able to learn more as you rewatch them. You're more than welcome to leave comments on this YouTube video or reach out to my team at Goulet Pens for any questions that you might have as you explore your fountain pen journey. My goal in this series has been to try to shorten the learning curve for you so that you can quickly learn what you need and jump right to the more rewarding parts of writing with your fountain pen. If you find yourself in need of any fountain pens, ink, paper, or pen accessories, do check out our online store at gouletpens.com, where we've specialized in fountain pen and fine writing since 2009. My name is Brian Goulet, and I'm really appreciative that you've spent this time with me. My team and I have made about 2,000 other fountain pen videos on this YouTube channel up to this point, so go nuts and check out what else we've done. Thank you so much for watching, and write on.